Easy now.
Easy now. Welcome back to the second episode of the Drive Talk podcast.
You remembered the name.
I know. I had it written down on my phone here. No, I didn't really.
Yeah. Well, I'm much less nervous than I was on episode 1.
Same.
Yeah.
Yeah, I even got my legs crossed and everything. Yeah.
You're much more chilled. We had great feedback from episode 1, so that's all good to know that everyone enjoyed it, which is good.
Yes.
So what we thought we'd talk about today is press trips. Because, I don't know about you, but when I first started thinking about YouTube, I saw some press trips that some of the guys were going on and just thought, how do you get on one of them?
Yeah.
Because they look amazing. And we've been very lucky, both of us, to have been on some amazing press trips. And what we thought we'd maybe start with is this year. I don't want to go back in time to the beginning, but we've done a couple of really great trips this year. So I thought we'd kind of just update you as to what we've been doing and then just talk a little bit about press trips. And on the surface, when you watch someone on them, they look amazing. And don't get me wrong, they are.
Yeah.
However, there's a lot of pressure. If you're a content creator going on one, a lot of pressure to kind of, get content made, I guess.
In a relatively sometimes difficult period of time.
Hugely.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a good subject to talk about.
Yeah.
Because on the face of it, and you and I are guilty for this, as are most people that go on these trips, we post all the good stuff. As you do, this is social media in general, unfortunately. And I say unfortunately because the younger generation look at what we do and what other people do, and they just see the brilliant side of everything. And as with everything, there's always a flip side to that. And I always post great things on my Instagram account, as do you, but there is a lot of stuff that goes on behind the scenes to produce those great moments.
You never post when you're having a bad day.
You never post when you're having a bad day. No, I'll have the occasional rant and then probably delete that. But yeah, absolutely.
But before we get into that, we are here again at Podium Place. Amazing venue to record the podcast. And we've got a few products in front. So I don't know if you guys have been to Podium Place. They have a coffee roastery downstairs, and they do the best coffee.
They do.
Although, I don't know, who's been leaving this here? Seen Through Glass. Who's he?
Seen Through Glass.
Yeah.
No idea.
Don't know who he is.
No.
Great coffee, by the way.
Yes.
And what have you got over? So I've got coffee, and you've got car detailing product.
I have, yeah. Well, they've got a fantastic.
The man who never details his car.
I know, yeah. I don't know why they're on my side. I'm definitely more of a coffee drinker than a detailing product guy. But yeah, they've got an amazing detailing bay here. And I mean, they do everything. It's like a one-stop shop, this place. So as we talked about in the first episode, it's definitely worth a visit down here. In this private members
Podium Paddock.
Podium Paddock. They've got some amazing sims down there that you and I might have got really competitive over a couple of months ago.
We might need to have a play on those on stage on a podcast.
Yeah, I think we're going to have to include them into a podcast at some point. But they got brilliant food down here, everything and anything. It's a really great place to come down. And I'm not just saying that. Like everything on this podcast, it's an organic shout out. I know you and I came here for the first few times organically. In fact, the first time I saw it was through that dodgy coffee label down Sam.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a really nice setup. So massive thanks to these guys.
Interestingly, I think pretty much when this podcast goes out, I'm going to be going on tour with Podium Tours.
Oh, you are.
And Sam is coming along.
Yes.
So it'd be really interesting to kind of, going back to what we talked about in episode 1, how we got into YouTube. Well, Sam and Seen Through Glass was one of the channels I can remember watching him grow, hitting 1,000 subscribers and so on.
Yep.
And now to think all these years later, I'm about to go on a tour with him, and it's very, very cool.
Very bizarre. Yeah.
So, an interesting segue then to talk about Michelin, because we're going to talk about press trips, and my first ever press trip was with Michelin.
Yeah, I remember you saying that, and I wasn't on it.
No, I was tiny. I was, 5,000 subscribers, something like that. That's the time when I met Jonathan Benson. Tyre Review. So we went to Ledoux, to the tyre test facility.
Oh, that's cool.
Near Clermont-Ferrand, and did some tyre testing. And I just remember thinking, wow, I'm on a press trip. And here we are, 6 years later.
Yeah.
Working with Michelin on the podcast. So it's a cyclical thing. What comes around
goes, full circle.
It's really cool. But so yeah, press trips is one of those things. I think first things first, to get on the radar of a brand, to get asked to go on a press trip, you need to have put the work in first, I think. Or do you?
I think
No, I'm going with that one.
Yeah, I do, yes. I think in our cases, yes, you do, definitely. But unfortunately.
Because you need, so why would you get invited on a press trip? So a press trip for me, there's two types. There's a car launch or car showcase. So you're going to drive a car.
Yep.
Maybe it's a new model, that's just come to market, and they invite a bunch of social media content creators. I'm not going to use the word influencers, and journalists. And you go to a venue somewhere. It might be in the UK. It might be abroad, and you get access to a car, and you create content around that car. The other type of press trip are maybe more lifestyle event based. So you might get invited to, Michelin took you to Le Mans last year, for example.
Yep.
So you need an audience, because what the brand is wanting to do is get whatever that trip's about on social media, right?
Yep. Get the numbers.
So if you could grow your audience organically, which is what you and I have done, or you could buy one.
Yes. Or buy 100 or buy 100,000. And I think this is the problem that we face, because we both know how hard it is to grow things organically, the channel, your Instagram account. And we can both also very easily spot the frauds out there. And unlike, let's say, relating it to a job where you might need a degree, or at the very least some A levels or even GCSEs, I'm sure people have lied about them in the past, but it's your CV, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
In many ways.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, these days, it's very easy to buy yourself a load of followers, and the brands and the manufacturers don't seem to have the capacity or time to look through or sift through some of these people. And you just look at their accounts, and I mean, they couldn't be more obviously fake to you and I, and they're getting treated in the same way. Sometimes, if they've got more followers than you, they're being treated nicer or better than you are. And you're like, but this is a real following. But I mean, it goes on, I'm sure, in every single...
I would have thought so. I mean, maybe it's worth just explaining what we mean by growing it organically, because some people might not know what that means. So you create content on a social media platform, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook.
Yep.
But the content becomes popular, it's viewed by people, and those people take it upon themselves to follow you or subscribe to your channel. There's no monetary exchange.
No.
And that's what we mean by organic growth. So
Yep.
You create good quality content, you're engaging, and that's how you grow your audience. Or it's possible to go to third parties and effectively buy followers on Instagram. It's a bit more tricky to buy subscribers on YouTube, but I think you can still do it. And then you grow this audience. So it looks like you've got, 100,000 subscribers.
Yep.
But half of those are fake accounts, effectively.
Yep.
But the challenge with that metric of how many followers you have on Instagram or how many subscribers you have on YouTube, that's this benchmark that describes how big you are,
Yes.
how much of an audience you have.
Yep.
How effective would it be if you went on a press trip with somebody?
Yeah, how valuable you are.
This amazing audience to share that experience with.
Yep.
So when you're on a press trip with someone who's clearly not got a genuine audience, and you could tell that because they've got 100,000 followers on Instagram, they put a picture up and it gets liked by 10 people.
Yeah. And then they hide those 10 people's likes.
Yeah.
So you can't even see how many likes they've got.
So you're like, okay, because if you've got 100,000 followers and you put a like, it should be thousands and thousands of people.
Yeah.
It. So that's probably, we wanted to get that off our chest for a while.
Yes. Well, it is something that does bother, I think, a lot of genuine content creators. It is disheartening when you go on these trips and you're like, oh, I've worked so hard to get here. This is so cool. And then you meet someone, you're like, and you look at their account, you're like, you've literally been going 5 minutes and you spent 100 quid on fake. But anyway, we could talk about this for years. But
so why don't we talk about the trips we've been on this year?
Yes.
And then what I'd really like to do is explain or take the listener / viewer behind the scenes of what it's like to go on one of those trips and the pressures that we feel. I don't know whether they're imposed by anyone else other than ourselves. But so I guess first off this year, I mean, I don't know whether you went, the first one we went on together was Dakar.
Yes. In January, middle of January.
Oh man. So we were invited to Dakar by Audi UK.
Yep.
And it was an amazing trip because we got really great access to the team. Unfortunately, by the time we flew out, because we flew out for the last weekend and the last day,
Yep.
Audi only had one of their 3 cars remaining in the in the race, which was a bit gutting. And Carlos Sainz, who I really, really wanted to meet, had flown home the day before.
Yeah.
I was like, oh,
Yeah.
because he'd had a big accident, which subsequently found out he'd actually damaged his back
Wow.
in that accident.
Yeah.
So,
But
but
for those of you that don't know about Dakar, so it's basically 2 weeks, wasn't it?
Yeah.
2 weeks of racing, about 3,000 miles.
it's a long way.
And hardly any of that is on anything remotely resembling a road. So it's like sand dunes and all sorts of stuff. And in fact, it rained. We were out there. It rained for 2 of the 3 days we were there. So the sand was actually mud, which was really weird. And yeah, it's just hardcore. The courses, the navigation. There's so many technicalities to it all. And then the survival of the machine and the driver itself is obviously right at the end of it.
Because originally it was Paris-Dakar, so it was a race from Paris to Dakar.
Yep.
It's Dakar. I can't remember what country it's in now. It's
Isn't it Morocco?
yes,
Yeah.
I should probably know that really.
Yeah.
But they had to change the route because of instability and unrest in the region. Then they took it to South America for a good few years, and now it's hosted in Saudi Arabia, and they just race around Saudi Arabia in the dunes.
Yeah.
But like I said, the endurance, and I think for me the logical thing was I went to look at the cars because the cars are amazing, and the Audi car was an amazing piece of technology.
Yeah.
But the bikes, I mean, the monomoto guys, the guys who are unsupported. There's one guy, a bike.
Yep.
Their toolkit's in this little crate. No one else can touch it. No one else can touch the bike.
Yeah.
And they're out on the stage for 8 hours or something, and they come in and they have to fix their bike.
Yeah, any issues
they can eat.
Yeah, yeah.
It's unbelievable.
It's totally self-sufficient. I think the only things is it their tents or something get carried from stage to stage with the trucks. But I love the camaraderie and the teamwork between everyone. Like you could see everyone was helping out, and in fact we were really lucky because we were literally on the ground. We had dinner in one of the big tents one night, didn't we?
Yeah.
Like thousands of people, all the teams, the mechanics, the riders, the drivers, they were all in the same tent, and that was really cool because you could feel, especially on that day, I think it was the penultimate day or night, so you could feel the relief and the happiness of people. You could feel the stories in the room and the tension or whatever. It was really, really cool. That was a special trip.
To be in that bivouac, and then the guys on the trip, because we had to Harry Metcalf on the trip.
Yes.
I always joke Harry's the only YouTuber older than me.
Yes.
But to have followed him for such a long time, and even pre-YouTube when he was in Evo and all that kind of stuff, he's such a legend. And then to have him on the trip, and it was a privilege just to spend time with him. We were out on the last day that we went out and watched one of the stages, and we were there with Harry, and he's there with his binoculars, and he was so excited. He was like a
brilliant
giddy child, wasn't he? It was just so cool to see someone of that ilk in the industry just clearly absolutely loving it. He's been a big Dakar fan for a long time. He's got a collection of cool Dakar bikes.
Yeah.
And it was really, really amazing to just spend time with him. A bit of a pinch me moment, actually.
Yeah.
Trying not to be a fanboy.
Yeah, no. I remember both of us were super excited at one point. We're all standing together. It was like, this is so cool.
Joe messaged me because we got the list of who was coming on it, and Joe was like, Pet, Harry's coming. I was like, what? Really?
Yes. Yeah.
So it was good. It was a really, really good trip. And then you went off. You did the trip I was very jealous of. So the other thing about being a YouTuber is when you get to know other YouTubers, and it's great if you get invited on a trip together because you can share it. But when somebody gets invited on a trip and you don't, it's really, really annoying. And you went to ice driving with VW. That looked insane.
Yeah, to Sweden, the top of Sweden. And again, with these press events, and we'll talk a bit more about the structure of them soon, and the good bits and the bad bits. But a lot of these experiences, let's say, are always fun, but they're usually in a medium to small amount of fun. They're like teaser fun. And by the time you film something and done whatever, it's all over and you're on the plane home or driving home, whatever it is. But this particular Volkswagen press trip, and I have to give them a shout out, it is an experience that you can buy as a customer. And in fact, it was a customer event that Volkswagen last minute had some spaces on, so they decided to send out some journos or content creators. So I was luckily influencers, so I was very lucky that I was one of those. And I tell you what, it was the actual customer event is 4 days, but I had about 2.5 days on the ice. And when I say 2.5 days, I mean 2.5 days behind the wheel, not 2.5 days of briefings and safety this and that. It's like 2.5 days of behind the wheel in this Volkswagen Golf R 20th anniversary. And what made it so good was all the instructors, the course they'd made, they kind of cut in. It's almost like an F1 circuit, but into ice. But it was safe. Like if you ran wide, it was like a Bedford version of ice, if you like. So if you did run wide, you would only get the car stuck at the very worst. You wouldn't damage too many things. But it was just such an amazing experience for me because I got to hone my skills more and more and more and more. And you could keep making mistakes, which is what you need to do to get better at driving. You can't do that on a track day because you'd end up, breaking lots of cars and costing you. But it was just, honestly, 2.5 days in, and I still didn't want it to end. And the only thing that was limiting me after about the 2-day mark was my mind. And the instructors there were saying, look, you're going to really feel it after a day or two. Your mind's going to be the first thing to let go, not your physicality, because you've got, it's a modern car. You've got you've got electric power steering. You've got everything's easy, but your mental state of focusing that hard for 2 days. And I remember I was absolutely destroyed when I got home for a few days. But that was brilliant. I absolutely love that, and I think that's going to be, as an actual driving experience, I think that's going to be very, very hard to beat. It's right up there. Yeah,
because we all watched the likes of Chris Harris and Tiff, I guess, in the day, the sliding cars around.
Yes,
and the only way you get to be able to do that is to practice a lot in a place where if you have an accident, it's not going to damage the car too much.
Exactly.
On a runway, on an airfield, in an ice track, or lower speed, low traction surfaces and stuff.
Yep.
Otherwise, you just never get that feel. And I watched your videos and I'm like, damn, he's already good. It's really annoying. He's already good at driving. Doesn't need to be any better.
Yeah.
But that did look something else.
It was amazing. It was a real experience. And I think that was January. I'm going to have to get my calendar out because then we went from, let's have a look.
It wasn't that long after that. Then we went to Ivalo with Michelin.
Of course. So let's just have a look. Then when was Michelin? Michelin was, so that was the beginning of March.
Yeah.
Michelin. Yeah. Yep. Which was awesome. I mean, that was one of those, that was what I'd class as an experience, like an overall experience.
Yeah. So again, by that time, we were already in quite deep discussions with Michelin about supporting the podcast.
Yep.
And the original plan was that we would go to Finland and actually record the first episode of the podcast in Finland.
Yeah. I'm glad we didn't because it would have been a bit cold.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. It was so cold.
Yeah.
And I'm glad we didn't because we've learned a lot in terms of how you physically have to put one of these together. And then we got the schedule, and I guess this is one of the things we'll come on to in a moment, is when you go on one of these, there's an itinerary, and the itinerary for that Michelin trip in Ivalo was literally from the moment you landed to the moment you left the country, you had something on.
Yeah.
But it was a really interesting deep dive into the world of Michelin. So there was, we got to do some driving, and I got to drive on ice for the first time, which we'll come to in a minute. It was amazing.
Yeah.
But Michelin have the Michelin Guide. They have Michelin-starred restaurants. We ate some amazing food.
Yep.
It kind of embedded ourselves into the culture of Finland, which I knew very, very little about.
Yep.
And those are the types of trips where, and it's maybe a natural segue to come on to how you create content. You go on something like that and think, well, okay, you look at the itinerary and think, well, what am I going to create here?
Yeah.
What's it going to look like? How am I going to film it? I've got X number of other influencers. They're all on the trip, probably doing a similar thing.
Yep.
How do I make mine a little bit different to theirs?
Yep. How do you cater yours for your audience as well? Because everyone's got different. It was a very I'd call it more of a lifestyle-y trip.
Yeah.
In the sense that it wasn't just about, like you said, it wasn't the driving. It was the experience overall. The tablet hotels as well.
Yeah.
All these things. It's like, how do I package this the best for my audience? And you've got, that's all a on the fly decision, really, isn't it? It's not.
You can on a car. I think a car launch is probably easier.
Yep.
So let's
research things like weight, cabin space. You can research all these things before you do a car launch.
Watch the first episode of the podcast or listen to it if you haven't done already. Thank you. Let's talk about, we'll do car launch first and then lifestyle.
Yes.
So you go into a car launch because you've just come back from M2 in Phoenix.
Yep. That was pretty good.
Jealous.
Yeah.
And I've done quite a few of those, and the first one you go on, I remember thinking, oh, this is the best thing ever. And then you get on the plane, and you look at everyone that's on and then I just had this overwhelming panic hit me because I'm thinking, I in my head I'm working out how much it's cost for my seat on that trip.
Yep.
How few people go on them.
Yep.
And I'm thinking I need to justify my place on this trip. I need to create content that's going to do well enough for me to get asked on another one.
Yes.
Basically.
Yeah.
Because I don't want it to be a one trip wonder.
You've got to be social on the trip with everyone that's there.
Yep.
You're everyone that's there. You've got to show time for while you're still stressing in the back of your head. So you got to put a brave face on and everything's.
Yeah.
But yeah, the Michelin. The M2 trip. So we're just talking about the structure, right? Of how they are, because so that particular trip, I think there was like several weeks of rotations, maybe 3 weeks, because the whole world had to go out to that essentially. So I think we shared it with Germany. So the German influencers or whatever, and journalists were there, and the UK. Just depends. Sometimes you're with the Americans or the French or whatever. But there was there's two types, but there's several types of journalists or content creators, isn't there? There's your written journalists that you still go on trips with, which we're jealous of on many of these trips, because some of these trips you get there, you get off the plane, you end up sharing a car with someone sometimes you don't know for a matter of hours, and that sounds like a lot of time, but it's not if you're filming. And then that written journalist can enjoy their trip, enjoy the car, and then sort of think about everything, get on the plane and write their piece when they're home or on the plane. Whereas when you're filming it, it's very different, because you've got to film everything, obviously. Think about what you're saying, learn everything there and then, make sure you're not getting anything wrong, or as few things as possible.
Light weights.
Light weights, and the important stuff that you wouldn't get wrong. And then obviously by the time you get on the plane and you think, oh no, I didn't talk about that, or I didn't include this, or it's already too late by that point. And I think there's such a changing landscape for how these trips are run, because at the moment, they've got to kind of cater for everyone. And I think I was with you in Nivolo when I got my M2 original program, and I was really stressed out by it, because it basically said that we picked the car up and we spent 7 hours driving it across Phoenix. It's like a round trip with the lovely lunch stop and whatever else. I mean, it would have been beautiful if I wasn't having to film a video, and then return the car. And basically it was 7 hours of driving, and it was 7 hours of sharing the car with someone. Now, from a content creator's point of view, that's a nightmare, because I'm personally not, that would be great if I was out there for a jolly, but if I'm there to film something, I just want a section of road that's got reasonably nice backdrops and my own time and space with the car. But thankfully, the program that I'd been sent was actually for the written journalists. Because when I inquired about it, they're like, oh, no, don't worry. We've got this little section of road. It was like 10 minutes each way. There was film crews around. There was everything there. The police or the sheriffs closed the section of road for me to do like timing stuff on, because the speed limits were a bit sort of low out there. And so everything kind of fell into place, because it was like, wow, I've got this section of road, it's so quiet, the police are going to close it, can film everything, the pressure's off, suddenly everything works in your way. But that wouldn't necessarily appeal to someone who is a written journalist, because they just want to get in the car and go and drive on varied roads. And
he's not. I mean, I did a Maserati thing last year. I went to Sicily for MC20 Jello.
Yes.
And
yes,
there was only three people there.
Yeah.
And me and two guys from France who were together. So really low numbers. There was probably 3 times as many Maserati people as there were, Duolos.
Yeah.
And we had a route and we had a lunch stop. But what was really cool is they said, we've got a professional film crew that, because you're on your own, they'll do drive-bys and car-to-car stuff.
Yeah.
And if you want help with your filming, and it was just mega, because instantly the film was better because I had a third party helping me.
Yes. Yeah.
And I'm thinking, God, I wish every manufacturer did that. It'd be fantastic.
It would. And I think a lot of them do, a lot of the bigger ones, but a lot of the time they've just got the 1 or the 2 groups. And if you're there with sort of 15 other journalists, they probably already nabbed them. So then, yeah, it's but again, that kind of goes back to what we talked about, I think, on the first episode, was being self-sufficient in the way that we are. It's good that we can wish for something like that, but if it doesn't come, we can adapt and get on with it.
Make do and mend.
Just make it,
Exactly.
Yeah, and it's not raining like it is here in the UK. That's the other good thing about a lot of these. Although I've said, so this year I think I've jinxed the weather, because when we were in Dakar, it rained for 2 or 3 days. And when it rained, remember that trip when we ran, in fact, it was on my Instagram story, we ran back to the car, we got absolutely down to our underwear soaked. Then I was in Arizona and it rained for about an hour of the day that I was there for the M2 launch, and they said it hadn't rained for months. And then more recently, I've just got back from Salt Lake City and Moab Desert, and it rained. The first day I got there, it rained. So I was like, I think it's me. I'm dragging this UK weather around with me, but yeah, weather's a big factor for everything.
Rain is, and again, until you get a camera out and try and make a video of a car, rain is the worst thing ever, because you can't really do any external stuff because you get rain on the lens. You can't put cameras on the outside of the car, which I always like to have 4 cameras running on a car.
Same.
Because it gives you lots of interest to cut to, and you can't really do that when it's raining because the cameras get stuff on them. So you're stuck with cameras on the inside. And it just knackers your whole time.
It does. And that's something else that maybe you don't think about when you watch our videos. I see it a lot, and I don't do too many now because drag race videos tend to attract a negative audience as opposed to a positive audience. But it's if you do a drag race video and it's wet, oh, why'd you do it in the wet? Well, let me tell you. Do you think this just happened? Do you think I just thought this morning, oh, it's raining, let's go and do a drag race? No. I thought a month ago, let's try and get that car involved, book the runway, which costs a lot of money, insurance, whatever else, and then it just so happened to rain. And, you don't want it to rain ever, do you? I mean, rain is our enemy in a lot of cases, but yeah, so when you see a video and it is raining for either of our channels, it's definitely not out of choice. You got to get on with it a lot of the time, and that can be challenging and hard. And I think that's why the winter months, I've never looked forward to going into winter months anyway before I did YouTube, but I think more so when you're filming YouTube and you've got a press car. In the summer, if you've got a press car for a week, it's a nice amount of time to have a car, because you're like, oh, should I film on Monday or Wednesday or Friday or the weekend? But in the winter, it's like, right, I've got it for this week. How's the weather looking? Dreadful.
And you've only got from like 9 till maybe 3:30. Light, and then it's too dark.
Daylight out, everything. So it is really challenging in the winter to get content you're happy with and weather that you're happy. Then you've got the wind factor. It might not even be raining, but if you're outside and it's absolutely blowing a gale, then the wind, you're worried about the lapel mic and all these outside factors.
And then someone goes, oh, you could have washed the car.
Oh yeah, they are the best. yes, I get that a lot. But maybe I should actually wash my car. But yes, I get that a lot with press car. I think the Octavia, Skoda Octavia VRS, which is a great car, filmed that recently, and I even put like a part in the beginning of it. I was like, right, the weather's been awful, and even if I cleaned it this morning and I drove it down here, it'd still be dirty. So just putting that out there, like, just no. But yeah, that is a big. That is challenging. Yeah.
Anyway, back to press strips.
Back to press strips. Yeah, where do we get to? What?
Well, I think we were talking about car press strips, and the final bit is how the thing I always find. I love being invited on press strips or launches. Yeah. But sometimes, and recently I've done it a couple of times. I've just not long ago had a Lexus, an RX 450h, and I was invited to the press drives of that, which was a UK event, but I couldn't make it. I had something else on.
Yeah.
And I sent the press team a note. I said, look, thanks for the invite. I can't make it, but I'd actually much rather just have the car for a week.
Yeah.
Because I've got much more time to spend a couple of days with the car before I even put a camera on it.
Yeah.
And really learn the car. I could do something more interesting. I can take it on a bit of a road trip or whatever. I think that's especially the case with electric cars. I did a DS launch about a month ago, and I only had the car for an hour and a half, 2 hours. So you can't really talk about what the range is going to be like. You can't get your head around the infotainment system. So
no.
And then you've got a whole bunch of other people doing exactly the same thing with the same car on the same roads.
Yeah.
And if there's an embargo, they all live at the same time.
Yes.
And you're like, well, how can I be different? It's like the studio shoot thing. I've only done a couple of those. I know you've done quite a few now.
Yeah.
I did my first one this year, and I was so excited about getting invited.
Yeah.
Because it means you're on the radar.
Yeah.
Great. And then just this, oh my God, this panic of how am I going to make mine different?
Yeah.
You can't drive a car. You can't do anything with it. You're just in a studio.
Yeah.
And that's the bit that it's a real pressure. To try and come up with a slightly different angle. I think if you use your own style, that helps.
Yep.
But you still need to think of something that's a bit different.
Yeah. No, I much prefer the whole. I think Audi have done a few over the years where one that springs to mind was RS6 back in 2020. So I think it was.
Was that the one where you drove the car back or drove it out there?
Yes, drove it. I can't actually remember. Drove it out there. Yeah. So just pre-COVID, actually, it must have been, I think, January 2020 maybe. RS6. So it was a press trip that they were having in Baden-Baden out in Germany, in the Black Mountains, Black Forest, Black Mountains, one of the two. One's in Wales, one's in Germany.
Yeah,
one in Germany.
Black Forest.
Black Forest. So I think there was like 3 different rotations when you're out there, but then there was also the option to drive out or drive back. To you and I, straight away, that drive out. Why? Because, well, you get the car, I got it delivered in the UK, had it for a day clean, so I could get some nice detail shots of it while it's clean, and then spend 2 days getting out to Baden-Baden, filming my own video. But the first day really was just time-lapsing and getting used to the car, like you said, having some time behind the wheel, taking it on the Autobahn on the way out there, experiencing lots of things with the car, so that when I turn the cameras on the next day, I've done so much in that first 24 hours. And that to me is an absolute godsend. And yes, Audi covered obviously the Eurotunnel rather, because they needed to get the car out there for the press launch anyway, and maybe my hotel and like whatever. But that to me is so much better than flying out somewhere, having the car for a couple of hours, and then just getting rid of it. I love those adventures because you're not stuck. You've got more freedom, haven't you, of what you can do and where you can go. And
one of my best press trips was with Mini, and it was a similar thing. Mini had to get 3 Minis to Turin for a press event.
Yes, yeah.
And they looked into getting them transported out there. And then the guys at Mini press team went, well, why don't we just get 3 YouTubers to drive them out there? And they invited me, Tom Howard, sad good mate, and another print journo actually, and we drove them out there. There was a red one, a white one, a blue one.
Yeah.
We drove them out to Turin, and we recreated the Italian job in Turin and drove around the Lingotto car factory
on the roof. Yeah.
Mate, it was just an immense trip, but it was a very clever thing for them. So they then had their cars in Turin for the event that week, but they also had 3 lots of content made of getting them there, and it was just such a clever spin. And like you said, you sit in the car for a couple of days, and you learn so much about it, and you create some really cool content. And that was still just as a trip. I think for me as a Mini fan to suddenly be on the Lingotto car factory roof with 3 cars and be allowed to drive it, which you can't do anymore. They've stopped driving.
Right.
You can't get up there anymore.
What, health and safety probably?
I think you could never drive around all of it because they put a cafe at one end, but you could drive around about sort of 2/3 of it.
Yeah.
And it was very special, but to do that, but that kind of thing where you get to drive it back, or you get to drive it there, do something a little bit special. They're cool.
Definitely
really cool.
Yeah.
Although filming a road trip I find really difficult if you're on your own.
Yeah, I think one of the challenges for that, because I did quite a few Petrolhead tours, road trips, which are still my favourite sort of road trips ever. Shout out to Pete and Dan if you're watching, listening. And I think when I went on the first one with them back in 2017, maybe, I was a bit, well, firstly, sometimes you can film too much. In fact, that's one thing you'll do when you first start out on YouTube, and it's something I still do to this day. And Patrick will vouch for this, because I'm always, if Patrick comes on a trip with me, was like, did you get that? Yes. Did you get that? Yes. Did you get that? Yes. Let's get a bit more of this, a bit more. He's like, no, you got enough, a bit more. And then you get home, you're like, oh yeah, we've got way
gigabytes of data.
Yeah, you got way too much. And I think that on that first trip, I did overfilm. I had GoPros everywhere, constantly filming, go through memory cards and stuff. But but there's so many cool things happening on a road trip that you do tend to overfilm, and what that does is give you more than enough content, but then gives you an absolute headache when it comes to the edit, because you've got to get rid of a load of stuff, number one, and it's just hard to sift through. But I think, yeah, road trips are hard because you tend to miss the stuff that's amazing on camera sometimes if you're not recording enough. It's like, it's a fine balance. And also you don't want it to, like so many of these experiences, trips, press trips, whatever, you don't want to ruin your experience. It's like when you go to, we've all done it, football game, rugby match, whatever it might be, a concert, and you're there going, oh yeah, this is amazing, I'm going to and it's like, and then you get to the end of it, you're like, did I actually really enjoy any of that? Probably not, because I'm
watching it through your phone.
I'm watching it through my phone, and everyone does it. The whole crowd's got, and it's the same on a lot of these trips, is we're there to create content a lot of times, so we have to do it, but you've got to be careful that you don't ruin the experience and your own experience, because but I think that comes with time and practice. The more oiled you are doing it, the more you can then enjoy the trip. It's a bit like this podcast.
Yeah.
The first episode, I'm not going to say I didn't enjoy it, but I was nervous, and until it was finished, I was like, okay, yes.
You're like a different guy on this one, seriously.
Oh, am I? Yeah. I'm feeling a lot more. I'm not
shut him up, to be honest.
I'm feeling a lot more relaxed now and really enjoying it, because the nerves have gone, and it's just like we're just sitting here and talking, and there happens to be cameras rolling and microphones in front of us. But yeah, it's I've lost my point. Yeah. Anyway,
I think, I mean, we're talking about filming too much. So if we go to the Evelo trip,
yeah,
which is like a lifestyle trip,
yeah,
so I go on a car launch. I kind of know in my head format of my videos. I stand by the car and do an outside bit, do an inside bit, take it for a drive, talk about what it's like to drive, and that's kind of in my head a video.
Yeah.
You go on a lifestyle trip, you're like, well, which bits of this am I going to? Some of it's just, do I bother with YouTube? You use Instagram a lot and do stories, and
yeah,
got a much bigger Instagram following than I have. But on Evelo, I'm like, well, I'll definitely film the driving bits. So I knew we were going to get to drive some cars on ice and have some experiences. In my head, I'm thinking they're definitely going to be there.
Yeah.
But when we went for a meal on the first night, you're like, well, do I film any of this? And then no, I'm not going to film any. And then you see all these people getting their cameras out, filming stuff, and you're like, maybe I should be filming that as well.
Yeah.
And then you find out half of them are food bloggers, so they're like filming the chef cooking the dinner and stuff.
Yeah.
But then you're panicking because you're thinking, well, should I be filming this or not? And
yeah.
What's the video going to look like? And then you get back home with all this rushes to look through, and then you try and put a video together. And
yeah,
it is like I said, you also just want to enjoy it.
Yes. And I think that's important for us, but it's also important for our audience, because they know us well enough now that they can see. It's like a couple of years ago, I was going through a bit of stress in my life, and I filmed for probably 6 months. I was having a really stressful period of life, which unfortunately happens to most people. You know, you go through ups and downs in life, and that was a down year. I thought I was okay in cracking on with stuff, but when I look back through my content, and I remember people at the time saying, you know, oh, you okay? You know, you seem a bit stressed, and I think it's really, your audience know you better than you do sometimes. You know, you think, oh, I'll put on a brave face and I'll be fine, but actually they can see that there's a problem or the stress. So if you're at a various press trip and you're not really enjoying it, or you look a bit stressed, then you don't really want to convey that or film yourself, do you? You kind of you want it to be as natural and normal as possible, but it is difficult. But yeah, that trip had a bit of everything in it. I think my personal highlight, and I'm sure it was yours as well, was the Porsche rally cars on Michelin's. So they were Michelin studded tyres, but they were like rally spec ones, completely illegal on the road. I mean, these studs,
they're only about 5 inches wide, the tyre, and massive studs.
Massive studs, aren't they?
But those cars, the suspension setup on those cars was just awesome.
Yeah, and the grip levels were just, I mean, it was just silly. Like, considering you were literally on ice, how you could stop and go was almost equivalent to a road car in the rain, you know? Like,
but what, again, though, you get access to the car. We had, 4 or 5 laps of that track, and that was it.
Yeah.
So that was it. There was no, can I have another go? Can I go back and I missed that bit. It was one take wonder.
Yes.
It was,
yeah,
I've got to get in this car, get it sideways enough so I look like I know what I'm doing on YouTube.
Yeah.
And then before, I was like,
and spit some words out.
Yeah,
makes sense.
No, I'm going to come back in again. But it was amazing.
Yeah.
I think for me the highlight actually was the guy flying the drone from the passenger seat.
Oh yes. Oh my goodness gracious me.
So
Silver, shout out to Silver if you're watching
absolute
this.
legend. So we're at the end of the day, we got to go in a 911 with Michelin's head test driver.
Yep.
On ice, just balletic the way he drove that car. It was beautiful.
Yeah.
And we were talking about it in the bar afterwards, and we could see Silver editing this video, this drone footage, and I'm like, oh my god! And I went over it. It's the best drone footage I've ever seen. I went, wow. Who was helping you fly the drone? Because normally when you at that level, you have one person flying the drone, one person doing the camera on the drone. There's two people.
Yeah.
And normally actually a third person spotting.
Yeah.
So wow, who was helping? He went, oh no, I was doing it myself.
Yeah.
And I'm like, wow, where were you? He went, I was in the car.
He was the passenger in the car.
Passenger seat of the car. Because we were stood waiting for our go, and the car went past fully sideways, and the drone was about 10 feet in front of it.
About a foot off the ground.
Flying back,
undulating.
Flying backwards. And Silver was just driving it, flying it from the front seat of the car.
Yeah. Unreal. Yeah. In fact, yeah, if you want to see that clip, give us a shout out on our Instagram. Because I'll
595 Moto or something, isn't it?
Yes, yeah, yeah. We'll send you the link to it.
It's unreal.
It
absolutely unreal.
Yeah, and you get to see and appreciate other people like him, who is just a magician at what he does.
Do you know what though, mate? I watched that and went, I'm never going to use drone footage ever again.
Yes, same.
I get my little DJI Mini 2 and hover it and drive fast.
Well, I take my drone everywhere. I've just come back from Moab, and I took it out there. To be fair, though, I did have good intention of getting it out of the bag, but you needed all sorts of crazy permits out there, which I didn't have time for. But yeah, drones are drones. If you're not crashing them or you're not allowed to fly them, there's always a reason that they're not up in the air. You know, there's something that you always want if you haven't got one, and then you get one and you find that you never use the thing.
I guess there's a legal caveat we probably put in here. Depending on which country you're in, the requirements in terms of licenses and so on.
Exactly.
In the UK, if it's less than 250 grams, it's basically you're pretty much able to use it. But if you're monetizing or commercially gaining from your footage, and it's over 250 grams, you need all the proper licenses.
Exactly.
It becomes a real pain.
Yeah.
In a bum, because you have to kind of put a flight log in and log all your flights with the CAA and all that.
And are you going to benefit from that? No. Maybe the audience might appreciate it a little bit, but
it does make it look quite cool. But
it does. Yeah.
But yeah, so my drone flying's quite limited. a bit of B-roll. I took a Kia Stinger to Wales earlier this year, and it was really windy. And I put my drone up I was on the Black Mountain Road. I don't know if that's a mega.
Yeah.
And I thought, I'll just fly it along the road and then just get some B-roll. And I flew it along the road and then turned it round to bring it back, and it just went beep, beep, beep. And it's too windy to return to home. It's just miles. I was like, oh, God. I had to run down the road till I was close to it and then just land it and pick it up. It wouldn't fly back to me. It was too windy.
Oh, well, at least you could get to it. Unlike many of my drones that I couldn't get to. Yeah. I think...
You crashed one when you were with Steph once.
No, that was... Steph crashed his... I think Steph crashed his one on that trip. But I've crashed plenty prior to that. My one that was on the Petrolped tours again back in probably 2019 or something. And it was gutting for me because at the time it was when my business wasn't doing that well. YouTube wasn't really making... It was 2018. YouTube wasn't really making enough money to become reality. So I was kind of stuck between two things and trying to figure out in my life what I was going to focus on because I needed something to work. And so buying something like a 600 or 700 pound drone was like a bonus for me. Or it was a bit excessive for the channel. But I took this one on the Petrolped tours, and we got to this amazing. It was just beautiful. I can't remember what the area was called, but it just opened up, and I was like, "Oh my God, Pete, hold the pack! I've got to go over there and film." So I ran around, and I'd already flown it a couple of times that day, and it was like 30% battery or something. I was like, "I'll be fine. Send it up." Right, Pete, yeah, get the cars to come through. And they took a lot longer than I thought. So as they came into shot, it starts going beep, beep, battery flat, and you can cancel it. So most drones today have got like a come home function, which is programmed in to make the drone safe and mean that if the battery runs out a mile in that direction, it's got enough battery power to come back home and land. But if you override that, then it's you saying, no, it's all right. I know what I'm doing. So I've kind of gone, no, cancel. I'm trying to get this shot. And then the cars come in, it's like 10%, 9%, 8%. And then anyway, it got down to about 5 or 4, and it was also quite windy. And I'm flying it back, and then all of a sudden it literally just literally drops out of the air. It smashes into this rock face, down into this ravine. So not only did I lose all my footage, but it was an expensive mistake. And I remember Pete and Dan absolutely ripping me for it. They're like, Joe, you know that function, the one that you press cancel? Yeah, you know what that's there for? It's like, yeah. But yeah, so drones, it's again, that's all part of the learning process, isn't it? And some of it can be expensive.
I got my first drone, and I know someone who worked for someone who got me a really good mates rates.
Yeah.
I got a drone and a little Osmo mobile thing. And I was flying it outside my house, just learning how to fly it. And my 2 kids that lived next door came out, oh, that's really cool. And I went, you think that's cool? What?
Oh, no.
Sport mode. Yeah. And I flew it towards me. I had not put it in sport mode. I was like, oh, it's quick, isn't it? Flew towards me, flew straight into the tree opposite my house. And it went into the top of the tree. And I still, it's one of those noises I'll never ever forget as long as I live. It can, because the rotors don't stop spinning when it flies into trees. Like, there's bits of branch flying everywhere, and it just came all the way through, landed on the floor.
Yeah.
And I think when I bought it, I got about 500 quid discount.
Yeah.
It cost me 500 quid to get a new gimbal. And it was never the same again.
Oh,
I'd only had it 2 days.
Well, that's a lesson. Never say watch this, because that's always going to end in tears. But yeah, and sport mode, because that disengages all of the sensors, doesn't it? Basically, yeah. Again, you're probably aware of it at the time, but you're just like, no, but I've got to show you how fast this thing is. Yeah.
So no, drones aren't. But yeah, so going back to Silver with just unbelievable skill.
Yeah, very cool.
Yeah, and the bit I do enjoy about press trips is watching other creators. I really enjoyed the Evolo trip because there were creators outside of the sphere of automotive. So we're talking to a couple of the food writers and and it was just really interesting to see how they go about the lifestyle guys. I went on a trip with it was with Fiat. We went to Milan. Tom Howard was on that one as well. It was a launch of a Fiat 500.
Yep.
But it was like a limited edition one, and it was in the fashion district of Milan.
Yep.
And it was a weird car launch because it was in the middle of a shopping centre.
Right.
And it was very kind of, fashion people and fashion influencers and stuff.
Yeah.
And again, fascinating to watch how they go about things and the way they create content.
Yeah.
Very different approach.
Yeah, because it's not like a rule book, is there? It's not like,
no.
It's like my previous life. I was a model booker, right? So I worked in a modelling agency, essentially as like an agent for models. But there was no way of studying for that. It was something you just learnt amongst others and got tips from and sort of build your own way. And it's the same, I think, with YouTube. There's no there is definitely right and wrong things to do, but we all do things slightly differently. We all have our own sort of special ways of doing it
and own styles, and I think that's important. But yeah, you're right. I mean, especially, maybe we've got another whole podcast on this one, but when you get to a point where you want to monetize yourself and your audience, and it's a fine line to tread. I mean, clearly doing this, we've got brands supporting us to make this possible.
Yep.
But when you want to try and go full time on YouTube, your sources of income, yes, you've got ad revenue from Google, but you can then do brand deals and so on.
Yep.
And I think that crosses over them when you go on a press trip. The assumption is, you've done a brand deal with a brand that's paid to have access to your audience.
Yep.
And then you go on a press trip or a car launch, and I think sometimes the assumption from the audience is you're paid to be there.
Yes.
And it's just not the case.
No.
I've certainly never been paid to be on a press trip.
Well, I think press trips you can't, because I think a press trip is a non-paid thing as far as I know. Yeah. Sometimes you'll share the same. There might be like a influencing paid, but this is there's a grey area here, which I actually have talked the last few press trips I've gone on, including Dakar actually, speaking to some of the Audi lot on that trip. There is definitely a grey area forming here, because you and I could be invited on a car press trip, or we could be part of the journalist group, or we could be part of the influencer group, right? So what does that mean? If we're if we're a journalist, then that means we've got our own point of view. Essentially, you're hoping that most journalists, whether they're news journalists or written car journalists, you hope that you're going to get some honesty out of them, and they're going to give us their honest feedback of whatever the product is they're testing. Right? That's what a journalist's job should be. Right? Report back to whatever it is. An influencer. So what is an influencer? Because if you're calling someone an influencer as a brand, you're already admitting that they are going to influence whatever it is that you're selling, whether it's a car or a product. So then, should you be automatically getting paid for that, or do you know what I mean? It's like, or are you then not allowed to have your opinion? If you're being invited as an influencer, are you then not allowed to have a negative opinion on whatever it is you're coming on? And so it's a really weird space. And then the problem with it is, as you just touched upon, is regardless, we will then still get accused. And I get accused. In fact, my M2 video that I've posted a few weeks ago now, Mark Schmark150 sent me a link to a Facebook group. I think it's an M2 Facebook group or something. And there's this whole section about me and how I'm getting paid by BMW to talk positively about their brand, okay? Or whatever.
Joe wishes that was the case.
Well, I wish that was the case. And also, I don't think they'll be paying me to say some of the things I say about some of their models. And especially, I mean, these are obviously people that maybe only watch my YouTube content.
They don't watch your comments about BMW marketing campaigns.
BMW's marketing. I mean, and and I try and be, I'm like you love your Minis, and we've all got soft spots. We both love Porsche. We love certain brands more than we love others, naturally, because that's the way we are. That's how I fell in love with BMW when I was really young, and I still love them, most of what they do, not everything. But just because I love a certain brand doesn't mean that I'm getting paid for them, unfortunately. And I think when you're accused of it, especially when you know that other people are getting, like some of these dreadful influencers are getting paid a lot of money by BMW to turn up to these awful events. And it is infuriating, because it's like, no, I just gave you my honest feedback. I think the new M2 is fantastic. Its looks are subjective, objective. I always get those two. Subjective. Yep. Of course they are. They are on any car. And aside from its looks, it's a brilliant car. It's a fun, excellent package for 60-odd grand, 65 grand. And there's no denying that. That's my personal opinion, and most of these people, in fact, I can tell you now, 100% of the people on that Facebook group haven't driven one, because they wouldn't have at that point, because the video had just gone live. So, don't accuse me of being paid to say good things about certain things. And, and
I think actually the reality is it's completely the opposite. So I'm a brand ambassador for the Hendy Group.
Yeah.
And I've been a brand ambassador for them for now 18 months or so. And I've done, before I was a brand ambassador, I'd done lots of videos through various dealerships. They've got 23 brands or so underneath there. So they're a brilliant dealership for me to be part of. And I approached them, and we had a discussion about being a brand ambassador. And what that basically entails is I get a car from them on a long-term basis, typically 2 to 3 months, although the last one I have for 7 months, because just car supply is a nightmare at the moment.
Of course.
But when we sat down and talked about that agreement, that relationship, one of the things I said is, look, I need to have the freedom. If you give me a car and I don't like it, or there's something about it that I don't think is that good, I need to have the freedom to say that.
Yeah.
And they said, we wouldn't have it any other way.
Brilliant.
Your honesty and your credibility is entirely based upon the freedoms.
Yeah.
When I announced that dealership, the amount of people went, oh, that's it, your channel's dead, you're just under the paymaster of Hendy, you'll only ever say nice things about them. Well,
yeah.
And I'm like, well, that's
not true.
True at all. And, fair dues at me. I think the challenge is that there aren't that many bad cars out there nowadays. Most cars in the round, if you compare them with cars from like the 80s and 90s, there were some shocking cars back in the day.
Yeah, I'm sure you own loads of them.
Pretty much. They were rusty, they were rubbishly built, terrible performance, whatever it might be. Most modern
breakdown all the time. Yeah,
most modern day cars are pretty good.
Yeah.
But
none are perfect, and this is the thing. Nothing out there is perfect.
Perfect.
There's a beautiful 911 Touring here, GT3 Touring.
Oh yeah.
That they've actually got probably for sale at Podium Place
through Redline.
Through Redline, yeah. And that car is brilliant, but it's not perfect. It's probably my dream car, but it's not perfect. Nothing is.
No.
Sorry, I interrupted.
No. But that, and that's, if you actually if you're in our shoes and you know the various press teams, they want that balance. They don't want a yes person. You know, I think the trick or the trap lots of aspiring YouTubers fall into is that they think that they only have to say nice things about stuff, otherwise they ain't going to get another car or they're not going to get invited again.
Yes.
And when you first go on a press trip or a launch, you do feel that pressure.
Yeah.
But then ultimately you need to balance it. Now, I'm not suggesting you become like a Clarkson who, you know, with one negative comment about a car can literally destroy a car. We're nowhere near that level. And you don't say rubbish things just for the sake of it.
No.
You have to be balanced.
Yeah.
But, you know, I'll always try and balance good things and bad things, or positives and negatives.
Yeah.
Every now and again you'll get in a car and you go, damn, I'm going to really struggle. Porsche GT4 RS.
Yeah.
Apart from it's a bit harsher ride and it's a bit loud on a long journey, really, it's not as pretty much close to perfect as a car as I'm going to drive.
What, another Porsche? Brilliant.
Yeah.
No, surely not.
So yeah, no, you have to balance that off.
Yeah.
And otherwise, credibility, you know, if we circle right back to the beginning of this podcast, we talked about organically growing an audience.
Yeah.
The way you organically grow an audience is by being honest and your audience trusting you. And I think if you do that, when you say good things, people believe you. When you say bad things, people believe you.
Yeah.
And that influences their decision to buy stuff.
Yeah.
You must get, same as me, people comment on, you know, how many BMWs have been bought because of you, how many Minis have been bought because of me.
Yeah.
Or whatever other car, whatever other brand.
Yeah.
You know, even push bikes. When I did Cycle Sunday, we sold a shed load of bikes to my subscribers.
I can believe it.
And that's because you've got that credibility. So, are we influencers? Yes. Do we get paid to do that? Sometimes we'll do a brand deal.
But we're openly, if we do,
you have to say it's a brand deal on the
and
so many there's includes paid promotion.
But so many people don't tick that box, and that infuriates me as well. It's like if you don't see that. Yeah, and that makes it complicated for people that are watching, because then they're like, well, is that paid or is it not? But it should be, and everything we do on YouTube especially is paid. Tick.
Yeah, make sure we tick the paid promotion box on this one.
Oh, yes.
Just checking, yeah. It will be ticked.
Yeah. But just, can you believe it? We're at the sort of nearly an hour mark.
I know.
I mean, that's flown by. There's so much more to talk about. I could sit here forever and talk. But I think, as we said in the first podcast, an hour is about.
Yeah, and I think as long as that, hopefully it gives you a background as to, you know, that we are in a privileged position to be invited to these events. It ain't all roses in the garden, though. There's a pressure, and I think some of it's self-imposed, to just be the best you can be, create the best content you can be, stand out from everybody else that's there.
Yep.
Make stuff that gets you invited again.
Yeah, back.
You want, you know, you create a video that tanks. That's not a great feeling. You want to be invited back.
No, but I think a lot of that also is ultimately, it's the content you produce, but it's also how you get on with the group and how you make the PRs or whoever are there, that, you know, whether it's an Audi event or BMW Mini, whatever, people are there, you want to engage with them and make their trip fun as well.
Yeah.
You just want to make the trip fun and get the most out of it for you and for them. And it's a fine balance. But when you're with mates, like
and you make mates as well.
You do make some good friends. Yeah,
there's lots of people, and you go on a trip where there's an influencer you've seen online but you've not physically met before. It's great to become friends with them and grow your friendship.
It is, and I think a whole nother conversation is talking about the relationships between us and them. And what I mean by us and them is us, sort of digital people and old school journalists, because it's very interesting actually. Some just don't want to know us and don't like what we do, and others completely the other way around. So you've
opened a can of worms.
Oh yeah,
at the end. Like on that bombshell. Use it out. We'll see you on the next episode of the Drive Tour podcast. Take care, guys.
Thanks for watching and listening.